Ladies and gentlemen, what is up? Welcome to another live edition here of the Hoof Podcast. I am Anthony Romeo tuning in here. You'll see that Sterling isn't with us tonight, but we are roaring and ready to go with my two guests from Cover One, and I'll let them introduce themselves. So, who wants to go first here? We'll start with Kevin. You want to go first?
Sure, why not?
Tell them which show you're on, how to find
Yep,
you, all of that. We'll start with that right at the top because we know you guys. This is, although I've been on shows with you guys on Cover One, this is our first time having you on the Hoof, and thank you guys for joining me.
Yeah, anytime. Yeah, you can find me obviously on the Going Deep podcast here. We're 5 or 6 episodes in. We're the Friday niche show. So get out there, like we like to say, to kind of view on your Fridays if you're old like we are and want to talk Bills and not going out. We kind of bring you that with different guests and cutting edge stuff. So always love interacting with you guys to kind of bring you that commentary piece of Cover One as well. So I really appreciate being on the Hoof as well for the first time, and excited to get going on what we have to talk about. And what a great time of year. That's all I have to say. Like, what a great time of year.
Yes, lots to cover, right, man? I'm just excited. It's like every day is an inch closer to that draft, the first night of the draft, which is it's just going to be awesome. I know I'll be there for the Cover One live draft coverage. I think Kevin, you're going to be popping on as well. Dave, are you going to be doing some draft stuff with us during that weekend, or are you?
That's something that's going to have to get figured out.
Maybe not.
We'll
All right.
figure it out. We'll figure it out.
Well, go ahead and introduce yourselves to the Hoof listeners who know where to find you on Cover One. But yeah, of course.
Yeah, I mean,
give the spiel.
I'm there with Kyle Slaggy on Monday nights. Just did our podcast last night, Cover One Roundup. We do all sorts of stuff. We get off the rails very quickly on that podcast. I think we weren't even a minute in before we went on like a 3-minute back and forth about what a meat raffle was. So we have a lot of fun, and it gets very off topic very, very quickly. Linemen, the big ones, you wouldn't know it by looking at me or by describing me, but in high school I did play and start at offensive line.
Very nice.
So
inside information.
I was
intimate.
Perfectly adequate by my senior year. So
now, see, if I said that same thing, I don't think I could get away with it. I don't think there's anybody here who would believe, like, yeah. I've met Anthony Romeo. He's definitely an offensive lineman. Like, yeah. I'm the kicker. All right, let's be honest.
Listen, if you were even a halfway decent kicker in high school, you were a king. I'm just throwing it. There's no such thing as good kicking in high school. It does not exist.
That's funny.
Well, again, I want to thank you guys for joining me for this show. We do have a lot to get into. We're going to cover the offensive linemen, definitely doing a mock draft as we have been at the end of the show, 7-round mock, no trades, but we'll do the picks for the Bills. And it's nice to have a new opinion when it comes to that for our show. And we're going to start with some news of the past week that we haven't covered yet here on the Hoof. You guys may have covered it on your shows, actually. But one of the big things that happened during the week, obviously the biggest news, is that Stefan Diggs is staying in Buffalo. He got the big deal, got the big extension. Not one day after, certain former GMs indicated that it was no longer going to be possible for the Bills to keep Stefan Diggs because that's the way the NFL was going. Sign big quarterback, no longer get to keep big name wide receiver who makes a lot of money. But once again, Brandon Beane works his magic, finds a way to make it happen. And I mean, this news was absolutely incredible. We knew it was coming. I was never fooled by this talk. And I don't think most of Bills Mafia was. All right. We know that Josh Allen and Stefan Diggs, they're this tight and they're staying together. And the number one, if I was on the first show we did in the offseason, the Salary Cap Spectacular, and I was on a show with Anthony Prohaska, and he asked, okay, what are the offseason priorities? My number one priority, keep Josh Allen happy. And you know what?
Right.
That was Brandon Beane's number one priority too. And how do you do that? You keep Stefan Diggs around for as long as you're having Josh Allen around. And those two, I'm excited to see their chemistry moving forward. But what are your guys' thoughts on it? We'll start with you, Dave, and go to Kevin after. What do you got? I mean, obviously there's a lot we could go on here, but
it was really funny leading up to that extension, that sort of in between where there was a lot of like vague tweeting from Stefan Diggs, and you had a whole bunch of Minnesota Vikings fans who were in their feelings like, told you this would happen. We've seen this one before. And it's just like, okay, but like Josh Allen is the quarterback, not Kirk Cousins. So like there's a little bit of a difference here. And you know, you knew that if there was actually real discontent with Stefan Diggs and the Bills, it probably would have been known through something more than just vague tweets. You know, it's like, and the other thing is like, take Twitter as seriously as it needs to be, but especially when it comes to like certain position groups, like tight ends just sort of tweet about how derpy they are. Quarterbacks are always like very like, oh yes, praise God all day, every day. You know, running backs are very like, oh yeah, we're back to the grind. And wide receivers are tweeting out like philosophy and weird stuff like that.
That's the best generalization I've heard position by position.
Take it as seriously as you need to be. And for wide receivers, just like it could be absolutely nothing. It can be absolutely. And in this case, it was more or less exactly what it was. So I am super happy that Stefan Diggs is back. He has been amazing. He is exactly what this team needed to help Josh Allen take that next step forward from average quarterback to great quarterback, and then to MVP level type of quarterback. So that I'm just glad that he's here and that he signed this contract with the public expressed intent of wanting to retire as a Buffalo Bill, which I think is very, very cool and very reflective of how the Bills have treated him and how this city as a whole has embraced him. So I'm it's very cool to see that.
Exactly. Kevin, what do you got to add?
Yeah, I think that he hit on a bunch of points there that obviously make a lot of sense. For me, I think 2 months ago, it was one of those things where it was like absolutely egregious idea that he wouldn't be a Buffalo Bill. I'll admit, like just like a tiny smidgen of doubt crept in after a couple of those trades. And I'm like,
Yeah, you're like,
like maybe it's not that crazy, right? Like I'm starting to think like we're talking about the draft here, you know, all week on all of our shows. And I'm kind of thinking like, will we have another first round pick this year? So I think that there's a little bit of that doubt that didn't make too much sense. But then once you started to see Devontae Adams traded, even Patrick Mahomes lost one of the best receivers in the league that they couldn't afford. You get that a little bit in your mind, like, who are we going to replace him with in the draft at the receiver position? And that's really where that doubt crept in. But they're best friends. They have that off the field chemistry with Josh Allen and Stefan Diggs. That's underrated. You know, not to say Kirk Cousins is a bad guy, but I'm guessing he doesn't relate to his players like Josh Allen does. And that's just such a huge part of any team on any level. You love playing with your quarterback. You might love your offensive line. That's so big to me. And Stefan Diggs proved it. He said he wanted to stay and he signed it. We've seen a lot of these big deals not get done. Look around the sports world. You can't just stop at football. You have the Yankees trying to fight with Aaron Judge. You have those kind of situations to where then it goes public. 230 million is not good enough. And then, you kind of have that debate. And as it goes on and on, it just gets sour. Stefan Diggs didn't take it to that place like you can see across sports. And it was kind of a really good note to say this team's ready to win. They were able to push some salary cap out, and it was just kind of a genius deal by Brandon Beane and basically kind of like a aha, gotcha moment to where you guys couldn't get it done, Green Bay. You're taking quarterbacks in the first round, and we're here able to sign our talent and to have them want to play with our not polarizing quarterback, not maybe in Minnesota and Green Bay.
Yeah, and think about how crazy it is that you extend Stefan Diggs. He gets this extension, and the salary cap, you actually get more money this year because of the signing bonus. His salary was converted to such a minimum amount this year that now we have money to go out and maybe sign a free agent cornerback to definitely take care of the draft class. We went from a little bit in the red to now, okay, we've got 12 extra million to play with all of a sudden. Granted, you do want a little bit of a buffer. You don't want to be at zero going into the season just in case. And Beane knows what he's doing when it comes to that. And there are other options as well. But this is a very, very good contract for both Buffalo and Stefan Diggs Diggs' agent. I think all parties are happy with it. And now we get to move forward knowing, again, that tandem is staying together, and that Brandon Beane can find a way, even when everybody in the NFL, even fellow GMs and players and the NFL trends in general tend to indicate otherwise. So it was just an awesome thing to see. And again, maybe we were feeling some possibilities of doubt because of what was happening around the NFL, but it had to happen, and it did. So great options there. Now for the biggest news of the week, by far, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, that's right. Bobby Hart is once again a Buffalo Bill. Bobby Hart back again. I swear he's like the offensive lineman who never dies. He's just got 28 lives, and you keep cutting him, he comes back. You cut him, and it's like the meme of Jason Momoa creeping up on Henry Cavill. It's literally it's he just keeps coming back, and I don't know what you guys think of this. Obviously, it's not a huge move. I think it's more of a two things. The depth move, clearly, Sean McDermott and Beane show some affinity for what Hart has to offer, be that in mentoring younger players or the fact that, hey, this is a stopgap guy who's willing to come in and play the position, and we can use him for what he's worth. So probably not much to add to this, but what do you guys have to say? We'll start with you, Kevin. What do you think about this Bobby Hart news?
I think he's just a vet practice squad topple. I don't know if those practice squad rules are still going to exist this year, or if they're going to implement kind of the COVID rules they had, or if they're going to start to crack down on the veterans like they had prior to COVID, as you can only have a certain amount of veterans on your practice squad. We'll see, right, where that kind of levels out as some of those news comes out in the weeds there. But I think he's a practice squad offensive tackle. Let's just call it what it is. First guy up, maybe a spot starter, and in a pinch. You saw him across the league a couple times and a couple different places throughout the season. Quite frankly, based on what we're gonna talk about today, and maybe what happens in the draft in general, I don't think you even see him on the roster. So to me, I'm not going to get too shooken up about it, but it does add to some backup ability, to compete against Tommy Doyle, who did struggle at times last year. And then, maybe a rookie could come right in and take their job from both of them, the swing tackle role, which is open, guys. It is open, the swing tackle role.
Yes.
This regime with McDermott and Beane has been great for a large number of reasons. They also, for whatever reason, just absolutely love really crappy backup offensive linemen. And I understand there's not a lot of good backup offensive linemen because they would probably be starting for another team most of the time. But there's a difference between backup offensive linemen and where Bobby Hart is as a player. But it is what it is. What Kevin said, it pretty much expresses anything that needs to be said. He's a backup, and he's probably not even really going to be on this roster for much of the offseason. So I'd be surprised if he actually did make the roster over someone. I mean, especially if they are going to end up drafting someone later in the draft. I think just about anybody can beat out Bobby Hart. And if you can't beat out Bobby Hart, whoo,
we're in trouble.
Yikes. That's a whole other conversation that needs to be had.
You don't want you on the roster anyways.
Cody Ford, anyone? I mean, I don't want to. We're going to get into some Cody Ford. One of the main topics we are going to discuss today is offensive line. So we know there's a need there. It's probably going to be a high value thing in the draft for the Bills. We all expect them to pick one, if not multiple, offensive linemen in this draft, I think, to fill that need, as Kevin mentioned, both at swing tackle, but also guard competition. Guard is open right now, although it looks like we have two penciled in starters. There's injury history, and you want to always have a deep bench at guard. And we know that Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane are no different. So we'll get into that in a minute when we get into the draft analysis of the offensive linemen who will be available this year. But one more topic that I want to discuss that has been one that we've floated a little bit throughout the offseason here on the Hoof, but has been a major topic of conversation throughout Bills Mafia, and that is Tremaine Edmunds. Now, we at the Hoof are major supporters, and in Cover One in general, I think we all understand who Tremaine Edmunds is and what he's been for the Bills at this point in his career. I don't understand where all the Tremaine Edmunds hate comes from, but the inevitably, whether we as the Bills organization wants to keep Tremaine Edmunds long-term or not, there has to be some trade value placed on him in terms of, okay, what will it take for us to move on from Tremaine Edmunds because maybe we can save money if we don't sign him to that long-term deal and find his replacement in the draft and move on. So we'll start with just the simple idea of, do you think this is a good idea or no to trade him? Why or why not? And also on there, what do you think the value will be? Because everybody's available except for Josh Allen. What value will it take to get a Tremaine Edmunds? We'll start with you, Dave, since we went with Kevin last time.
So I don't think it's a good idea. Because I mean, Kyle and I talked about this last night on the roundup. I mean, it's a very complex situation with Edmunds because he's very young. Obviously, everybody knows he was very, very young, 19 years old when he came into the NFL, and has had some good seasons in the NFL and had some good play. It's just the main thing has just been consistency and not making the big plays that a lot of people expect to see from a top tier linebacker in the NFL. And so when you think about that, you think about, okay, so then you have this sort of, somewhat inconsistent linebacker who has made good plays and can also call the plays on defense, because that is something that he does. He has that green dot. He is the one who calls the plays in the huddle for the defense. And what is the market for a player like that? Mm-hmm. And what is his agent wanting his actual paycheck to be? Because I'm guessing it's probably two different eye levels coming across right now. And I think when there was some smoke a little earlier in the offseason that they were pursuing that, like, a veteran was being shopped around by the Bills, and people kind of assumed that it was Edmunds. If that's the case, I would imagine that most teams probably said to his agent, look, he's a very talented player who does some really good things, but whatever we have to give up to get him and then also pay him is not worth it. Like, we would be fine with just paying him. We would be fine with trading him with like 2 or 3 years on his rookie contract. But you have 1 year, and then we have to either get that 5th year option in, or is this is 2023 would be his 5th year option, right?
This is his 5th year option.
This is his
he's on it
option.
now.
There,
yes.
That's right. Okay.
Or they would have to franchise tag him and or extend him
Yeah.
At that point.
So then at that I can't imagine a team. Let me rephrase. I can't imagine a lot of good teams making that decision. There are certainly teams that would be making that decision and just sort of, throwing caution to the wind. I mean, we saw Sam Darnold get traded for a 2nd and 3rd round pick and have his 5th year option picked up before he even played a snap for the Panthers.
Yeah.
So
Kevin,
I think what's interesting here is I'm on the more critical end of Tremaine Edmunds. If you follow my Twitter throughout the season, I'm hard on him, but it's because I expect stuff. It's like that old, of course, that old comment in life, like, you're hardest on the ones you love or that you like or that you want to see succeed. That's like me and Tremaine Edmunds. Like, he's got so much talent, and to see him make so when I posted a play about Crowder, well, he made that long touchdown in Buffalo, and I was like, the Bills are going to look forward to this. My entire mentions were about Tremaine Edmunds missing that tackle, but that's kind of him in a nutshell. Where I was trying to show, literally forgot that Edmunds was in on that play,
right.
And I was trying to show that the explosive slot that the Bills may have signed, and of course it turns into the missed tackle, which he should have made the play. In fairness, he should have made the play for 10-yard gain. I mean, we'll call it what it is. But I need to see more out of Tremaine Edmunds. And the age excuse is going to get old quickly. But at the same time, I also recognize his immense talent. Why would we want to trade a pick with our 1st round pick? And you asked what trade value, most likely to trade up to get a linebacker. So it's like you're losing your 1st round pick and the player. At some point, that's just not amazing value for your franchise.
Right.
To get a straight up 2nd for him. Okay. Then we can talk about, a replacement here on the Hoof or on anywhere else and talk about replacement linebackers, but to use the 1st, use the player, that's challenging for me because I do think he has a lot of talent. I think that a $13 to $14 million extension is just what market value is for him. It's going to be tough for me to think he'll get less than that when you have others, Miles Jack, et cetera, more in his range of $57, $58 million. that's his extension. I do think teams can get creative that have cap space and take that $12 million that he's getting paid now and extend it out like the Bills did with Diggs or others. So I think that you could see that happen for a team, and and then say, he's talented enough for me to give a second up. The Bills go, good luck with finding a linebacker in the draft. And I think that there's teams that'll do that. Look at the Ravens. So, it's possible that teams like that could make a decision after missing out on some free agents.
Right. Definitely agree. It's probably, and I posed this on one of the early shows as well, that it's probably the most intriguing question of the offseason that we won't know until after the draft, I guess. It could be draft night that a team calls and says, all right, what'll it take? We'll give you a first and a second round pick this year, plus a veteran linebacker or something, okay. That's now intriguing to me. Okay, we have to think about that a lot harder than we're trying to get rid of Tremaine Edmunds, so give us a second, and that's okay.
Right.
No, definitely not. And go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is just like we could talk about replacing Tremaine Edmunds all we want, but like when you are trying to pursue a championship for 2022, it gets really dicey. I mean, there's definitely options. There's definitely players that are better than Tremaine Edmunds. There's also a whole lot of players that are way worse than Tremaine Edmunds and could create so many more problems by just getting rid of him. That's how you end up in. That's how teams end up in like quarterback purgatory. It's also where you end up in like linebacker purgatory.
You don't want to be in linebacker purgatory, especially in a Sean McDermott-led defense. Right. That's been my argument for Tremaine Edmunds all along, is that the guy is consistent, and you forget that he's the one running the show, and we know what we're getting out of Edmunds. And I'd much rather go into this season where we're Super Bowl contenders with what exactly I know who they are than the unknown of, oh my God, what's going to happen with this new player in the position. Whether it's a potential upgrade or not is irrelevant to the fact that I know what I got versus something I don't know yet, at least for me. So that is definitely a big one. And I know we're going to continue that conversation too, probably right up till the draft. But now, gentlemen, we can get into our draft analysis position by position here. We're going to start with the offensive lineman today, and hopefully we'll have time to go defensive lineman as well. And basically how we can talk about this. The conversation is going to flow naturally. But you're talking obviously about tackles and guards, potentially a center too. Usually interior offensive lineman includes guys who can play both the center and guard position. An offensive tackle, we can talk about left and right tackle positions. But in this draft in particular, the Bills are picking at 25. There are a lot of great offensive linemen, and it is a sought-after position. There's no question every year, no matter what year it is, no matter who's at the top, those are facts, right? When there are good offensive line is always a position of need, and guys are always going to go early. And this draft is no different from that. So I think what I want to center the conversation around is who are some of your favorite guys in this draft and who are the best fits for the Bills and why. You might think that. And we can go maybe round by round, starting with round one. Your favorite guys don't have to be guys that are going to the Bills. Maybe your favorite guy is one of those top guys who's going to go in the, top 10 picks automatically, basically. And surprising if they get out of the top 5. But I want to hear from you guys first, and then maybe I'll give a little bit of my input as you go. If there's a guy in particular, we'll start with round one. Say we're at pick 25. Obviously, the impression is I would be more shocked if they pick a swing tackle at 25, but the impression is that guard is more valuable at this point to the Buffalo Bills, a bigger position of need than tackle. So I'll start there and say, is there a guard that you are hoping falls to 25, and why is that the player that you are hoping goes to the Bills? And if not, what are some other potential options? So I don't know who wants to go first. Kevin, if you're ready,
sure. Yeah, I'll jump in. Guy that I have listed here, and I think a lot would agree, is Zion Johnson, a guy that actually might give you some swing tackle versatility, an Isaiah Wynn clone. So that's kind of what, in my mind, he can come in and maybe give you some right tackle ability and be able to play more than just that guard spot while you have Ryan Bates on the roster as well. And then you have, that future controllable asset as well, like we like to use around here, and then maybe be able to fill in for Saffold down the line. Zion Johnson's got to be a hard consideration. If he is on the board at 25, he's one of those names that might bump down a receiver, might bump down corner if somebody like him is on the board. And right now, based on his metrics and based on a lot of his testing results, he lines up like an Ali Marpet. Like a guy that you can come in and be a solid, he comps to him 78% based on his data. So to me, it's a lock if he's there in terms of being my favorite player, I should say. Not that the Bills will take him,
Right.
but that he'd be by far a high-end asset that the Bills could then utilize.
He falls,
at the guard spot.
You're running that card
spot.
up there,
Right.
basically, it sounds
It's,
like. Yeah.
it's tough to say that you would not immediately, unless you have a receiver that you're like, this is a Josh Allen specialty. It's tough to say that he wouldn't be on, we're talking at 25. That's the move.
If it's an offensive lineman, that's the guy you're going for. Excellent. Dave, what do you got to add to that? Do you have a different name or?
So, I mean, just sort of a little bit about Zion. I would be all in on that because I like the idea of just having someone that is going to be a part of this team, like moving forward. Because like we're all happy that Ryan/Rick Bates is back. I think we would also probably agree that like it's not a guarantee that he plays super, super well like he did down the stretch last year. I don't know. Like it's a different. It's going to be a similar but different offense, and also a new offensive line coach. Things are just going to be kind of different. And the other part of this equation is like Roger Saffold, who is like a really good 1-year contract to have, but it's also just a 1-year contract for a 33-year-old offensive lineman. I would be much more comfortable about the offensive line moving forward if like you have someone like a Zion Johnson who's just like sitting around and like, hey, I'm ready to come in whenever you want.
Yes.
And so the other part of that is like there was so much offensive line shuffling last year where like it is not unrealistic to say that offensive lineman at 25 is like not a luxury pick, but a pick that like really should be really in consideration. Because at any point, someone like Roger Saffold, again, 33 years old, or Ryan Bates, I mean, any of these guys could be hurt. Mitch Morse could get hurt. Deion Dawkins could get hurt. Any of these guys could get hurt. I mean, it's a tough position to play all now 17 games. I think that offensive linemen, especially if Zion Johnson is there, I'm 100% sprinting to the podium. Another guy that would be interesting is UNI tackle Trevor Penning. Trevor Penning, I mean, he was like, when the Senior Bowl was happening, that was more or less my entire timeline, was just clips and commentary about Trevor Penning being a total bully to everyone at the Senior Bowl. And like, there were some people where that was like a little too much for them, where he was just like going after people for absolutely no reason at all. But like, you know what? That's what I like in my offensive lineman, because that's what Spencer Brown was like. Again, another UNI guy, just like, I'm going to just punch you in the face. I'm going to give you a flying elbow at the end of a play. You know, it's just like, that's what you want in an offensive lineman. And that's sort of what you want in a lot of like players in general. It's just like, you want to be able to, I want to be able to tell you, pull it back a little. I don't have to tell you to, kick it up a notch, because sometimes you can't always just like turn that like mode of aggression on for some people. Like, but I can always tell you, hey, listen, settle down for a little bit. I love the passion, love the energy. Let's channel that a little bit better.
Him and Spencer Brown, man.
I think about that sometimes. It's just like putting him and Spencer Brown right next to each other and just letting those two tee off on it.
Just hearing you say that, the name that keeps coming to mind is Richie Incognito, right? It's Richie Incognito. Yeah. He's the tough guy who's going to bully you on the field. He's going to, stand up for his guys on the field. He is a tough guy. Yeah. It's not like he was, cheating or twisting guys' ankles or anything like that. Right. But he is a bully on the field, right? Yeah. Somebody who just is taking over on the field and showing you his energy and his worth. And I'm okay with that. I like guys like that on the field, right? And we've seen how Spencer Brown has caught on for the Buffalo Bills and how much excitement he brings when he's pushing guys down on the field and then he's pointing at him as he's getting back to the line, right? Like, heck yeah, maybe he's showing that intensity on the field, and I'm all about that. I'm glad you brought up Penning, because even though he is a tackle, I do think that if he's on the board, he's certainly an intriguing option.
And the thing with Penning, much like Spencer Brown last year, I mean, these two are somehow two of the most athletic offensive linemen that the NFL has ever seen, and they both went to the University of Northern Iowa.
Whatever they're feeding him there, it's that corn-fed, those corn-fed country Iowa boys, they are doing things right out there. Whatever.
So when you have that level of athleticism, though, it totally allows you to basically play any position on the line.
Mhm.
I mean, I wouldn't necessarily love the idea of a 6'7" center, because that's things get a little awkward when you're. There's a
Tossing
whole
it,
lot
yeah.
of order of operations that's sort of out of sync there when you're that length there. But I think having him at like guard, and especially in a zone scheme where you want that length to be able to reach and get to the second level quickly, where I think the Bills with Aaron Kromer and Ken Dorsey are going to be leaning more towards the zone scheme. I think that could be something that is intriguing. And if Trevor Penning is available, he might not be. There might be another team that like is totally in love with him and takes him before 25. I could totally, I could totally buy into that.
I actually would project that Penning would probably be off the board, and Zion is the other one where is he going to be there? I expect that somebody's going to pull the trigger again, just because offensive line is such an in-demand position. So let's play that scenario out. Let's say Zion and Penning are off the board. The next guy I go to is Kenyon Green, the interior offensive lineman, guard mainly. Could play tackle as well. I like his intensity. I think he could be a guy on the Bills board in terms of his style and play, and the fact that he is a guard and he's somewhat projected in this range. So that would probably be my line of offensive line in the first round. Do you guys disagree or have other takes on that? Is there another guy you would be like, no, this is a guy whose skill set I think does translate to the first round and could be another name on the board here at 25?
I think that's probably a good line. I mean, depending on where you would have somebody like a Tyler Linderbaum,
right.
I think that's probably like that range, because then you start getting into the Tulsa guys, the Central Michigan, or another sort of like Dylan Parham and those sort of guys, and those guys are like perfect, good day 2 type of guys. But I don't know if that's somebody that I would take over, like, a legit corner, let's say, or a legit wide receiver. Like if a Chris Olave or Trent McDuffie is available, like I'm not passing up one of those guys for a for Tyler Smith or
just because we need
Bernard. Right.
And I would tend to agree with you there. I'm glad you brought up Linderbaum, because we took him in one of the mock drafts recently that Sterling and I did on the show, and the chat just blew into us and said, like, no way, he's a tackle only and he's too small to play guard and he's not gonna, or a center only, all this stuff. And I'm like, guys, this is a talented athlete player, and I believe that if he's on the board, the Bills are going to consider him at 25. And in this scenario, we're taking him because there is a possibility that the Bills could look into this guy and take him. So I'm not necessarily one who buys into, oh, this guy fits this mold because he's this shape, right? If that were true, then Cody Ford is a right tackle, right? How do you feel about that now, right? Like, how many still think Cody Ford is a right tackle?
Right.
Yikes.
Cody Ford is going to be, selling donuts at Wegmans this year, because I don't think he's going to be playing in the NFL.
My question is back to you, though. Like, what happened? So if we're talking about maybe potential guys that'll be gone, you're missing Zion's off the board, Penning, Kenyon Green might be off the board. Did someone fall? Does a Charles Cross
exactly
fall? Like, what happened?
Something has to happen there, right?
Yeah.
Does Charles Cross fall? And do you consider a talented tackle like that?
And that's always the tricky part about the draft, is like, at a certain point, some team's going to zig when everyone thought they were going to zag.
Right, exactly.
And it's just going to be, what position did they take? Who does this then push down, and what team sort of reacts to that, and what move gets made here, and blah blah blah. It just truly one domino, and everything just like completely falls apart.
Yeah, exactly. Quanu, like you don't know who might fall on the board, and a guy that you just had lockstep in 12, but then you get Zion bumped, you get Penning bumped.
Yep.
At some point, there's not
the other
7
thing
of them that go.
And the other thing with that is, and we were talking about this earlier, Anthony, where like that first domino might fall with the Jaguars, because apparently there's smoke that they might take Tavon Walker at first overall.
I've been talking about this.
Maybe they don't. Maybe
I've been talking about this
smoke, but like
every week on the Hoof. I've been talking about this as we push start on our mock draft. I always go, what I love about this draft is nobody knows what's going to happen in the top 5 this year. Yeah. Every other year, the last few years, it seems like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all set.
Good year to not have a top 5.
Let's go here. And it's like, there is nothing, nobody knows who's going to go in the top 5. It's easier when you're at 25 because obviously we have a inkling that if some of those guys we expect to go in the top 5 drop, they're going to be taken in the top 10 by somebody who's just like, well, this guy just fell in our lap. Much like the Buffalo Bills with Ed Oliver, when I wrote the New York Giants a giant thank you note for drafting a quarterback ahead of the Bills so that Ed Oliver fell into our lap. Anyway, I don't want to digress too much, but yes, that is definitely a point to make, that nobody knows what's going to happen at the top of this draft, and that uncertainty makes it fun. I can't wait till draft night because that'll give us something to discuss, even though the Bills pick isn't 20 picks away or whatever. It'll still be interesting to see what's going down. And after studying all these guys, we want to see where they land. But that brings us to, you brought up the position of 25. Yes, somebody could fall in offensive line. And although we are mostly projecting guards because we know that that's the bigger position of need for the Bills, a tackle would be viable here if it's one of those top guys. So let's move to day 2 of the draft and talk about rounds 2 and 3 now. There's a number of guys projected here too. Again, valuable position. It's always going to be on the board. I want to start by saying, and maybe I didn't necessarily ask you guys to prep this, so it's fine if you don't have a name in mind, but is there a guy you love in rounds 2 and 3 and you think would be a great fit for the Bills? And also maybe a guy that you're like, even though this guy is there, he's not the one that I'm want on my board at that point, that I would pick from my board, because I think that's the interesting way to do it and give multiple opinions, is to say, yes, this is one who I do have my eyes on and I would like, and also to counter that, this is a guy, even though some are liking him and he's supposed to go in round 2 and 3, that maybe wouldn't be my favorite if he was picked. I think we started with Kevin last time. So Dave, do you want to start out here?
So someone that I think is interesting is Darian Kennard from Kentucky. Now he's big. He's 6'5", 322. He is raw and he's got some issues technique wise to figure out. And I don't know if it's just because he wore number 70, but part of me is reminded of Cody Ford when he came out of Oklahoma. But the thing is that, like, when Cody Ford came out of Oklahoma, there was all that talk about, like, is he a tackle? Is he a guard? Is he this? Is he that? At first, the Bills thought he was the right tackle. Turns out he sucked there. Then they tried moving him to guard, and then he got hurt. And then then they kept him at guard and tried moving him around. It was a mess. Development was a mess. His, overall technique and talent was kind of all over the place. The whole thing was just a mess. But with Kennard, you have someone who is going to be, if he gets taken by the Bills, going to Aaron Cromer, who's one of the best offensive line coaches in the NFL. And I think that he is somebody that, like, I would totally trust whoever Aaron Cromer wants to take. That's just sort of my general feeling towards offensive line, is like, if this is an Aaron Cromer guy, then I'm going to trust that he knows that he knows what he's doing, because he does know what he's doing. I know that he knows what he's doing. And from what we've heard, we know that he has connections to Kentucky and a couple other schools. And there's 2 different Kentucky offensive linemen in this drafting, Kennard and somebody else that we might get to a little later.
Right.
But I mean, if they end up taking Kennard, I'd be intrigued by it. He's not somebody that I think would, sort of be like he's not like a Zion Johnson, where, like, if he is in the starting lineup for whatever reason, I'm like, oh, okay, this is totally going to be fine. And all is well. He's somebody that might struggle in year 1, but I think he's somebody that, like, year 2 could take, like, a huge step forward. And especially, like, because he did play right tackle in college, but I think everybody is kind of consensus feeling like Kennard's a guard. Like, there's no, like, discussion of, like, well, he's this, that, he can maybe play tackle. It's like, no, he's going to be a guard in the NFL. So I think if he just stays on that track and doesn't have to play a whole lot in his first year and just learns under one of the best O-line coaches in the NFL, I think you can have somebody really, really good down the line.
Yes. Like it.
Yeah, I think that's a good pick. And I think there's a couple guards there as well that you might be thinking about. Dylan Parham, aforementioned there from Memphis. Like, I think that he's just a solid pick and he'll get it done. Have him right now kind of fiddling that second round value. If all those guys that are gone in the first round we kind of just went through, his value's probably increased a little bit and might be that second round pick value. And I think that, you're not going to get a complete finished product in the middle to late second round. Like, it's just not going to happen.
Right.
So to me, Parham is a really good guard that I think that could come in and be a real good depth piece on the roster for a long time. So I like that pick. I think he would add instant depth. I think that you'd be able to start him at times. Some of his comparable players that I have jotted down here, Shaq Calhoun, you have, Richie Incognito, 82.1% based on his profile. So you have some, yes, wow. You have some of those names there. Cam Jurgens, 88.8%, similar to him. So it's very interesting to kind of see his total comps. And if you could add a guy that profiles out like Richie Incognito, based on his 40, his 10-yard split, a couple of his broad jump was pretty decent. Some of those athletic traits. What is our offensive line coach? Maybe why he was able to match Bates. He loves that athletic profile.
Right.
And there is stuff there to work with. I think he likes that raw ability. And like we talked about Incognito already, potentially with that fire that we've seen from other players from Penning. I think that the actual player himself might match up to a similar player here. So he's a guy I'm watching. And I think after you get down the slew of first couple players, he's a guy I'd like the Bills have.
Exactly. I mean, again, we're picking later in the second round. It's not like we have one of those top picks. And a lot of these guys, again, being premium position, could be gone. So I like the names you brought up, but I have to say I just completely blacked out Parham on my draft board now because Dave compared him to Cody Ford. So
I could compare Kennard.
Oh, Kennard is Kennard's the one then. Nope.
Yeah.
Sorry, Kennard. Nope. You are done.
Don't you do Parham like that?
Yeah, no, not Parham. But anybody who uses a comparison to Cody Ford, I am just nope. I don't want any part of it. No, in all actuality,
all the way out on that.
When it comes to Cody Ford, we are, as Bills Mafia, extremely hopeful. The best case scenario there is that Aaron Kromer comes in and actually turns him into an offensive lineman who's viable, right? Even if it's just the swing guy and not the starter.
Yeah,
Aaron Kromer's the only guy who's going to get something out of him. And at that point, we know that decision is going to be made. You are cut when the time comes because you're not it, or we've gotten something out of you thanks to our offensive line coach who was able to make you into the best thing you are. And another name that I would bring up on this list is Ed Ingram, who I think, depending on where you're picking, could be a guy that we're looking at offensive line. I don't know if there's any other names in this batch before we move on to the next round. But again, athleticism, everything you guys said fits the profile. I agree that Aaron Kromer is guiding this process. If he says that Kennard is my guy, even though he's comped now to Cody Ford, then we're drafting Kennard where he should be drafted. If they have him in the second round and Aaron Kromer says this is a second round guy, this is the guy I want, then great, pick him and make him into the guy. And obviously this is assuming I don't expect them to go back-to-back offensive linemen. That would be a crazy scenario, especially given the needs at other positions like cornerback, etc. But, it could happen. It could happen. But again, follow what Aaron Kromer is guiding you to do. I don't know if there's another name here in the second and third round that you guys want to mention. We can skip right to day 3 now. Deeper draft, less reach. Find your guy in the later rounds. Is there somebody you are like, look, okay, we might not have gotten one of these top guys just because of the way the board fell. Give me a guard or a swing tackle. Maybe if we did get a guard early, we still would need a swing tackle. We could pick one later. Is there a guy on the board on day 3 that certainly wins your heart over, is somebody you're like, this is the guy for me? Kevin, we'll start with you.
Yeah, let's shout out quick, to kind of wrap up all the first days.
Sure.
Kind of Cole Strange is a guy that I need to bring him up from Chattanooga. Where does he fall on the draft board? I've seen him on a couple of different rankings, so it's tough to know where he ranks. But man, that 9.95 RAS is awfully enjoyable for. We've been talking a lot about Kromer, and we can't mention Strange. But when we're talking about the second and third rounds, we can't not mention him because that RAS profile might be one enough to say, hey guys, he's on the board here. We're sitting in the third round. We didn't take one yet. He might be the one that could be one of the last of those guys that could potentially bring a lot of that fire. I know, the profile of competition, but I mean, I hate to keep bringing it up. 80% comp to Joe Tooney. JC Treader, not 79%. So there's a couple names there that get an offensive line coach pretty fired up, a little squirrely, a little antsy when you see those kind of names, and he's still on the board. So
Kevin, I'm liking these numbers you're bringing to the table and the names. I mean, just, it's one thing to say, oh, they're 80% to this guy, but the names you're bringing are exactly the type of names you're like, this is what the Bills need right now.
Yeah, and it's based on their profiles. I try to look up guys that Cromer likes based on the current roster, based on him matching baits, based on him liking athletic players. That's what I'm looking for, high RAS scores. Tommy Doyle's another one, was drafted based on that score. So to me, it's like, it's possible, it's realistic that they would go ahead and do something like that. So he's definitely one there in the second and third rounds. And if any of these guys fall, we talked about it all today, they would be definitely my preferred there as you're sitting there in the fourth round. But to be a little bit more realistic, there is a couple names that do stick out to me a little bit. Justin Shafer from Georgia, he's a guy that I like a little bit. I think he brings that 6'4", 340. He's a bigger guy, but I think that he can add a lot to the table in terms of this. And just real briefly to add some razzes to this kind of conversation, Chasen Heinz, 9.32 LSU, a guy that could come in and be something. And that's why I like Shafer as well, 8.69 Raz score. He's probably one of my guys that I liked early in day 3, just based off of his athletic profile and what he's able to do. And he was basically a super under the radar guy. That's what you're looking to find from a big time program. I think Cromer could get behind a Georgia player, used to this kind of system, as well as that athletic profile. So that's who I'm looking at. Schaefer's on the board. Bills haven't addressed the O-line at all. I'm probably pretty adamant as we reapproach the fourth round.
I like it. Yeah, I definitely agree there, especially in the later rounds. That athletic profile, we know they've drafted guys like this. We know this is what they go after. And now adding Cromer only makes that even bigger option. So those were some good names. You got something else for us, Dave, or you want to add to those?
Well, so somebody who's sort of, depending on who you might ask, is sort of kind of walking the line between day 2 and day 3 is Kentucky center Luke Fortner. We obviously brought up Kennard, another UK offensive lineman. Fortner is somebody who I think a lot of people feel like is a center only type of guy. I don't necessarily feel that way about him. I think he's somebody that can play any interior position. But I think having somebody who has that versatility to play center, and Ryan Bates can do that too. He's played basically every single position on the offensive line, but he can't snap the ball. But I think also having somebody like Luke Fortner on the roster, where like he's sort of similar in that regard, where he could sort of move in between those 3 interior positions, and he's somebody that, like, I don't want to say plug and play, because that kind of implies somebody closer to like a Zion Johnson type of player. But I think he's somebody where, like, if you put him in there year 1, I think he has the technical know-all with what he has right now to be a solid enough player in the NFL where it's like, okay, you feel comfortable about him moving forward, and you don't feel like you're going to your offense is going to get derailed when he goes into the lineup. And I think that he could be somebody that the Bills end up targeting if he falls into day 3. There's some places, I know SIS has him as their 79th rated player overall, which is probably the highest I've seen anybody put this guy. So so that'll be interesting. I know there are other people who are like, he's probably more of a day 3, round 4 type of guy. But it'll be interesting to see where he ends up. If he ends up on day 3, I think he's going to be one of those guys that, like, a lot of teams try and like move up a couple spots to get. Because there's always those guys that leak into day 3 that are like that. So we'll see. He's somebody that is intriguing to me. Outside of that, there is a couple guys. So in this draft, we have a very interesting situation where there's 2 starting offensive linemen from the University of Central Michigan and also from the University of Tulsa that are in the NFL draft at the same time. It's a little weird, but guys, so we'll talk about 2 of these guys. Chris Paul, who played right tackle for the, I believe it's the Golden Hurricane Tulsa Golden Hurricane, if I'm remembering correctly. Wow. Which is just about the most unusual college mascot I've seen. But he's somebody that has has some good technical ability to him. He's definitely somebody that is a guard player only, because he's somebody that would definitely struggle in space, and you see that on tape with him. But he's got a little nasty to him. He's not quite the big Richie Incognito type bully, but he's somebody that I think could really work. My only reason on why I think he would not necessarily be a Bills target is that he struggles to get to that second level, which is really important when you're doing that zone blocking scheme that I think they're going to lean more into. And I think if you put him in an offense where like it's more gap control, more gap scheme, run offense, he'll be more successful. So I think that this just might be an issue where like fit just might not be there for them. But I think he's a solid enough player, and if they feel like that they can get a little extra juice out of him to where he can get more consistent, climbing to that second level and getting those blocks there, maybe they end up taking him. But we will see about that. The other one is Luke Godeki, and he's from Central Michigan. He's
a Chippewa.
He is a Chippewa. The Chippewa and the Golden Hurricane.
There you go.
Two of the most renowned mascots in all of college.
You know what? At least it's not another college saying, "Oh, we're the Tigers." It's like, yeah, all right.
Yeah, right. I like it. Creativity.
Yeah.
Still doesn't beat the Gooey Ducks, but we'll take
the Golden Retrievers.
That's right. I actually watched an Albany game when I worked at SIS, and they played against Central Michigan.
Okay.
The Golden Retrievers versus the Chippewas.
Nice.
Oh man,
that's a great matchup on paper. It's not the Tigers versus the Lions.
But with Godeki is interesting, but he's kind of similar in with like Chris Paul, where it's like he's going to struggle in space, he's going to struggle with speed. But I do think he has a little bit more of that second level ability. I'm not like super convinced that he would be able to do that, but I think he is a little bit better than Chris Paul in that regard. He definitely has that attitude as well with him. I think that taking a tackle who has that experience of working in space and putting him into guard is interesting, because I mean, for me, and this is not necessarily the best example, but this is the best way I can try to explain it with what I have right now. But for me, when I was playing offensive line in high school, I hated playing at tackle whenever they would try to put me there in practice or whatever, because I hated playing with that much space to one of my sides. It made me so uncomfortable. I felt like there was so much space for them to just like rope around me and just kill whatever quarterback was behind me. But at guard, which is where I ended up settling more into, I felt about, all right, I got someone next to me here. I got someone next to me here. This is the lane that I get to work in, and I could just do whatever I need to do there. And that made me so much more comfortable and made me feel like I could just live in that little lane, get that seal here, you run that play in the alley, as Lombardi loves it. But I think taking somebody who has that experience, even if they're not good at playing in space, having that experience of being in space and then moving you inside where maybe you have a little bit more comfort there, where you may not have experienced that before, I think is interesting, which is why, like, you can't just look at like, oh, this is somebody who is like you said earlier, that, oh, this is someone's a tackle only. It's like, maybe not. And like, I don't love always, moving some guy around from position to position, but I think it's more important to keep somebody on one side of the line rather than one specific position on the line. Like, I'm good with like moving a guy from tackle to guard, or, if you really feel like they can make that swing, maybe even go from guard to tackle or something. But moving somebody from right tackle to left guard is a total switch up and very difficult to try and do, because now you're switching what hand you're putting in the dirt most of the time. You're switching all the sort of muscle memory that you've trained over the years being in a position where you've been in. And it's very tricky. You ask any former offensive lineman on Twitter, I mean, they will tell you the exact same thing. They're like, listen, it is not as simple as like just flipping the roster on Madden to get all the 80 or 85 overall guys on your offensive line.
Exactly. And I think, again, we're falling back to that point of versatility is important. Yeah. If a guy plays guard, tackle, or looks like he can play guard or tackle, and looking at our coach in Aaron Cromer and saying, you decide what you think is coachable, identify those traits, and especially if we're talking a day 3 draft pick here, somebody who is developmental, and say, okay, you can't teach this trait, that trait, these things, this quality, but I see this guy's tape and I can see that he has a problem with his footwork or his hips or whatever it may be, his hands, and I can coach that and I can work with that and bring this guy from a day 3 draft pick to an all-pro, right? And if anybody can do that, Aaron Cromer definitely can. Again, and that's what we're looking for on this day. I don't care who it is the Bills draft. I believe those couple of sentences to be true, that Cromer identified something, watched this guy's tape, and said, even though he's a day 3 pick, these are the things I love, and I can turn this guy into an all-pro. And just to bring up a couple of names, again, you said a couple of these, but ones that we've talked about on the Hoof that tended to bring up big debate, especially at the time when they're being drafted, is Thayer Munford and Cade Mays. Thayer Munford from Ohio State, Cade Mays from Tennessee. These are guys where when we've debated picking them in 5th, 6th round or later, the chat was kind of split on, oh, no, not him. He's not a great fit. This guy isn't going to be the one, and he's going to suck and whatever. But if they have the traits, the size, the versatility, the footwork, again, whatever it is that is identifiable and is looked at as a quality that they can work with to develop them into a guy, any day 3 guy, again, is going to be developmental. You're not putting them in there plug and play starter, but you think that you can make them into a star. And those are the names that keep coming up for me. I don't know if there were others for you guys, but those two in particular especially seem to be together. Are you a Munford guy? Are you a Mays guy? Kevin, it sounded like you're definitely more on the Munford side, and you're like, okay, he's a guy I'm comfortable with. Do you have opinion on Cade Mays as a yes or no fit for the Bills, or do you think he's right up there in the same position as a Munford?
Yeah, I think they're similar, right? Like, I mean, I think you got to consider them in as similar guys. And for sure, like, it comes down to, like, when you're thinking about some of these decisions, I think, like, especially with Cromer now, especially kind of what they've done in the past with Doyle, like, I'm just looking at, like, does the athletic profile fit the scheme? Does it allow him to go to the second level? Some of these decisions there for the roster. So at the end of the day, I need them to feel comfortable with that profile. I trust everyone in that decision-making process. And then I think that they know that moldable clay, especially if we're not talking about somebody day 1 that needs to step in and start for Ryan Bates or step in and start in a pinch. Look at Tommy Doyle. He's still from Miami of Ohio. He's a Red Hawk. He's still very raw, struggled at times. But that athletic profile is something that they still think that they can work with. And maybe they develop him into the swing tackle, and maybe they don't touch offensive line at all. I don't know. I don't know what they're thinking. But I think if they miss out on some of the top end talent guys, I think, to me, do you feel like you need to have that moldable clay when you have a moldable clay Raz 10 of Tommy Doyle? I don't know. Like, to me, it's like you're just kind of using picks at that point.
Where is the value? Yep. Yes, exactly.
As compared to stocking DBs.
I would definitely agree that, yeah, maybe you would want to go with a cornerback or whatever. And we are going to get to our mock draft shortly. I did want to cover, maybe let's just do interior defensive linemen, and we'll go through pretty quickly since we're already 58 minutes in, and I don't want to keep you guys too late tonight. But we'll go through starting with maybe round 1/2, I'll say, since we are picking at 25. I'll start by saying, we know that interior defensive line, at least before the Bills made all their signings, was a position of value and need for this team. And I still look at it as future position of need. So I would love to get one, maybe not in round 1 unless one falls, but round 2 or later. Let's get one of these guys in here to learn from this interior defensive line we've set up now, who can come in and then plug and play next to Ed Oliver long term. And certainly when we're looking in the draft this year, there are the guys who are at the top. I don't know who you guys expect to be on the board, but Jordan Davis, one of the way he performed at his combine, I think before the combine, he was one of those names that was floating around. After the combine, he blew everyone away. I think he's definitely going to be off the board at that 4, just the athletic ability he showed. But names that are maybe on the board, a Devontae Wyatt, Perion Winfrey, and I don't know how low you guys go, but certainly in round 2 for me, in my early mocks, the name I loved was Travis Jones. Gimme Travis Jones. That definitely seems to me like put him behind this defensive line we have. He doesn't have to start right away, but he could be a plug and play guy starting next year, if we end up losing one of those new interior defensive linemen we signed. So just brief thoughts on those players. What combination do you think at 25 one of them will be available, or would you maybe go my route and pick a Travis Jones in the second? Let's start with Kevin again.
Yeah, I think for me, it comes down to, I think this is one of those other positions that people can have their favorites at. And does that push Jordan Davis down the board if a Devontae Wyatt is the guy that somebody likes? Sure. I don't think that'll happen in this group specifically, but weird things happen in this draft all the time. But Travis Jones. So though I will say, if you don't want to swing the trigger at 25, you're going to lose out on most of those names you just mentioned. I don't think any of them will be there in the second.
You'll have
Jones
to trade
up.
Yeah.
Jones is gone. Wyatt's gone. I jotted down here. Davis obviously is gone. I think Mathis could be gone. I think Winfrey could be gone. That pretty much puts us in another tier where I don't really want to get into overly, like in terms of what the Bills roster needs. I don't know that they would need that developmental guy. They can do whatever they want in the fourth but in day 2, I'm not thinking about a developmental defensive tackle. I think they might need to that could be a sneaky position they trade up at, so I think you're right. Like a Travis Jones, they start like Cody Ford in the terms of getting antsy about the player being probably
where he is on the board. Yes.
Correct.
And I agree that I think getting an interior defensive lineman, particularly if the Bills happen to trade down from 25 and have 2 picks in the second round, I would love it if they end up with one of these top interior defensive linemen and one of those big positions in need, like cornerback, interior offensive line, et cetera, right, that we've talked about. So, Dave, anything to add to the interior defensive line conversation there before we move on to our mock draft?
There's guys that'll be available that I think the Bills might be interested in, whether that's a Logan Hall or Perion Winfrey or Fedarian Mathis. I don't know, given how much they've put into the defensive line as a whole the last 3 off seasons, how much they'll actually invest or how high they'll end up investing a draft pick into this when there's other things like another wide receiver or a corner or offensive line, whatever that might be. I don't know if that's what they're looking at for this year. So I would be a little surprised if they ended up. I mean, before free agency, I think all of us were looking at who are the nose tackles? Who are the nose tackles? Yep. Where do we get 2 of these? But after free agency, it's like, okay, well, I think things are fine. At least for this season and probably also for 2023. But I think 2023 is when you can at least start looking into maybe there's somebody here. If there's somebody that they really like and really like the fit, whatever.
Yeah. And definitely, I could see that happening where they're just like, you know what, this isn't our biggest position in need. But I never underestimate Brandon Beane's ability to say, this guy, although nobody predicted we'd pick him, was the best guy on our board, so we picked him. And that's that. And at where the team is at this point, you have the luxury to be able to do that.
Yep.
If you pick a corner in round 1 and there's a corner falls to you in round 1, all of a sudden round 2 becomes a luxury and you're like, interior defensive lineman who was a top second round pick falls to us late in the second round. We're taking him. We have no choice. We are taking the best player on our board at that point. And Beane isn't afraid to work his magic if he's like, we were in love with this player as a potential pick at 25, who's now still available mid-second round. We've got to trade up and find a way to get him. So I tend to agree with Paul here that I have a feeling Beane is going to blow us away with this draft. I just can't see him sitting still considering how many picks he signed elsewhere last season and depth this season. Yeah, we're gonna see what happens. Beane loves to make trades, loves to have those conversations. We know that. And it's going to be interesting again this year. So with that being said, let's fire up our mock draft machine for Through the Draft Network again. At the end of the show today, we're going to do full 7-round picks for the Bills. We'll mock through all of the other teams and just see who's on the board, have a quick discussion, look at some of the positions, and see who we would pick. So with that being said, let's go ahead and hit the start. And we see right away that the Jaguars go with an edge, number 1 overall. And as usual in these mock drafts, cornerbacks just go flying off like free candy. They are just gone. We're not doing trades today for this draft, but now we'll see.
Sort of,
let's overview.
A little quick review. So Malik Willis goes 2nd overall, which is that's another thing that could end up happening. It's not out of the realm of possibility. And then again, something like that just sort of pushes things back and totally messes things up.
Malik Willis, 2nd overall pick, drafted higher than Josh Allen. That's absolutely nuts. Might not even be a starter, but potentially drafted higher than Josh Allen.
Andrew Booth, who a lot of people have been talking about, maybe being able to fall.
Ooh, 12.
Ends up going 12 to the Vikings because I guess even without Mike Zimmer, they still want corners.
McDuffie going 14 there. That's another name that's been. We just talked about Jordan Davis.
Zion Johnson to the Eagles.
Devontae Wyatt at 20. Yep. Devin Lloyd, who is somebody I am high on at linebacker.
And then
I keep seeing him on Patriots.
Jackson Hill, who a lot of people like as a potential corner transition.
Correct.
To Cowboys.
Now off the bill. I've definitely heard that more in recent. So now let's go to our board here. What do we got on the big board? Let's start with the big board and work our way down from there and position by position, if we will.
Yeah.
So we certainly have Linderbaum. We talked about him. I've taken him in a mock draft before on the show, and it wasn't a big hit. I think if this is the way the board falls, Kenyon Green would be the one that I'm targeting here in terms of interior offensive lineman. But we also see a position we haven't talked about tonight, but we've been talking about all along here. Wide receiver, Chris Olave, always on the board, it seems, in the TDN mock drafts at 25. I've said consistently I'd be surprised if he's still there at 25 for the Bills. Certainly a name we have to consider here and a position we consider. And we could go down the list. What are your thoughts looking at the board the way it's fallen now? Who's the name jumping out to you that you would pick? Do you have a strong inkling?
I mean, if we're talking O-line here, I'm good with either Linderbaum or Green. If we're talking anyone on the board, I'd be fine with Chris Olave. I mean, if we were looking at trades, I would totally be interested in trading back. But that's not always an option. Right. So I think that I'd be good with Linderbaum, Green, or Olave. I don't know if there's anybody else that quite moves the needle enough to where I'd be willing to pull the trigger.
Was Kobe Dean still there? That is a player you'd have to consider as well.
Dean at linebacker, is he? No, he was taken just before because he was taken by.
Devin Lloyd was taken by the Patriots.
Devin Lloyd was the Patriots. Oh, maybe.
Yes, Kobe Dean is
still on the board. Oh my God, I do love me some Nakobe Dean. We talked linebacker last week on the show.
It'd be challenging to leave him on the board.
Watching his tape, seeing how he plays, just the
I think that Dean, if you take a Nakobe Dean 25th overall, you are signaling to the rest of the NFL that Tremaine Edmunds is on the market.
Yes, exactly. I agree that if you take Nakobe Dean, you're saying that we are going to take trade offers or at least trade interest. It doesn't necessarily mean that has to happen. You can keep him on the roster, make him linebacker 3 for now, and train him to be the replacement for Tremaine Edmunds. So I think as you
see them both falling, though, you have Lloyd on the board at 21 and you have Nakobe Dean falling as well. You're kind of thinking at that stage, let me pick up the phone, maybe not to trade up or back. Maybe it's to start fielding offers for Tremaine Edmunds at this stage, knowing the board's falling right for you and to have a deal worked out as basically you're handing in the card to take Nakobe Dean and then cashing in another 2nd round pick or whatever the value might be going in tomorrow. So that's essentially a trade back in a way that you're going to get the linebacker that you want at your original draft spot and have a 5th year option on him, just like you did Edmunds, but then cash in on a trade back in having 2 2nd round picks tomorrow.
So to me, always with the inside information here, saying Kenyon Green and Chris Olave, 2 of the highly scouted players.
I think Green gets more playing time day one, but I mean, you need to draft your linebacker in terms of if you are trading Edmunds.
And I do. Dean is a heavily scouted or a heavily likable player on tape, and whether or not he fits the Bills, the position is one that is going to be of need if something happens with.
But mine's Olave though. After all that being said,
you want Olave,
Chris. The ability for who's the most expensive. We talk about it all the time, like how important running back is, right? Like how important is it or isn't it in terms of its value? But the value at receiver and the number 2 position behind a premier quarterback, as we discussed at the top of the hour, was the receiver position. And quite frankly, can you keep like Gabriel Davis? But before that, you have to make that decision. Why not add such a talented player in Chris Olave on a late first round pick rookie deal, giving Josh Allen more weapons? There's still snaps to be had at that position.
Yes.
I know it's crazy. Chris Olave makes so much sense. He shouldn't even be on the board. That might be one the Bills need to run up, just because let's make this wide receiver room and Bills offense that much scary. The Bills have scouted him for a reason. It's hard for me to leave him on the board, even with Nakobe Dean and Kenyon Green there. If Olave's on the board, that Josh Allen might be making another phone call to somebody.
Saying, hey, this is the guy I want, and here's
there.
why.
You don't even have to trade
you have him. He's a legitimate number 2 contending wide receiver, and I've been consistent in saying that I want that competition for Gabriel Davis to keep him being at his best game. We can't hand him anything yet.
No.
I do think we want to bring in competition. Is Olave our consensus then here? Is that who we're going with? I would be surprised if a team like Green Bay or somebody didn't take him ahead of us. But
I think that if we're not trading back, I'm going to go with Chris Olave. We're going to try Chris Olave.
So there was Nakobe Dean right after us. Right after.
And then Kenyon Green. Can you even trade back in that case?
Right. I mean, exactly. How far back does he go? And now we're seeing some of these second round picks that I really love going off the board here. And here we go. We're at 57. Now we've got more guys that I've seen a lot on the board here, starting with the position we shall not name. Running back, everybody knows how I feel about running back. There's just too much value at other positions. But there are 3 names here that everyone is talking about. And if they fall to as far as 57, the Bills are going to have to consider them. You got Kenneth Walker. You've got Isaiah Spiller. You've got Breece Hall. Pick your favorite, flip your coin, whatever it is you want. Me, I'm looking in another direction. I do not want to take a running back this high. I will say, if those are the 3 on the board, I am more of a Kenneth Walker guy here.
Fair enough.
If we're talking, looking at the board the way it is now,
since we looked at so many offensive linemen, let's look at it here. So we got Sean Ryan from UCLA, who we didn't really cover. Hey, Dylan Parham, Darian Kennard, both on the board. Cole Strange on the board. Alec Lindstrom on the board.
There's some good names there to maybe sit on.
So this is my argument, right? This is my argument for the Bills in this position, right? Do you want somebody, an interior offensive line? And I mean, we talked about Parham, we talked about Kennard, maybe being the guys here. What I would take them, an interior offensive lineman who I value at pick 57, over a running back at this position, because I feel like if you get the offensive line, you have the running backs who can do what you want to do. You're not going to be a run-heavy team. Who helps your team more? I want an interior offensive lineman who's going to protect Josh Allen, who's going to open up the run game more for whoever plays at running back. Maybe that's me. And Dean is in here making an argument for Sean Ryan. I don't know if I said that right. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Could be. And
so right before the Bills in this situation pick, Roger McCreary goes to the Cowboys, which is rough, because I would absolutely pound the table for Roger McCreary right now if he were there.
Who's another one?
Yeah, I mean,
the Bills probably aren't happy.
You sat and you're like, 2 of them, only one of them has to fall to us. Bam, bam.
I could totally see if, like, you get to pick 50-ish or whatever. Brandon Bean's just pounding the numbers on the phone, just like, someone take my call. Someone please take my call. And
I'm not liking the cornerbacks at this point. I couldn't take any of these guys.
There's no one that I'm like,
we're gonna have to look in
round 3. These are all like round 3, round 4 type of guys.
We're gonna have to look in round 3.
Let's go back to the O-line. I mean, I'm kind of into a number of these guys. I don't know if there's one in particular that really stands out more than the other. I mean, we all like Parham. I can see Kennard. We talked about Cole Strange. Alec Lindstrom is somebody that some people are really high on.
And just because I don't like running back doesn't mean I would like you guys to discuss where you value running back versus maybe a Parham or, Sean Ryan.
With all 3 of these guys available, I mean, I'm totally cool. I'm cool with taking running back at this point. I wouldn't say I'm in love with it. But I do think the one issue that the thing that's really like keeping me from being more into running back at this position is just that Kenneth Walker, Isaiah Spiller, and Breece Hall are kind of like the consensus top 3 at those positions. But I don't know if any one of those 3 guys give enough on their own, just sort of, remove the whole offensive line equation from that or whatever. But like Kenneth Walker struggles to be like a consistent pass game contributor. Yeah. Isaiah Spiller is good, but like doesn't bring like a ton of athletic ability that like a Kenneth Walker brings. And then Breece Hall is like a super home run hitter, but I'm not really sure about him overall. I mean, there's some people that are really, really into him, like B-Dome, who is like annihilating the chat right now.
By the way. Picking him at 25, some people, and it's just, I hate it. I cannot say that enough.
We know that.
Every time I read
we know that.
So, no running back in round 1.
I'll try my best at 57 here, but if it helps you any better, his highest comp at 80%, or one of his highest comps, is Jonathan Taylor. The guy is a home run hitter. He's the ability, what he can bring to the Bills offense might, once again, Josh Allen might be picking up the phone again here and saying, hey guys, it's me again for the 3rd time after the Diggs extension, after you just took Olave. Going to ask you for one more thing. I'm feeling pretty good about the O-line, and I think some of those names that we already like, Strange, might fall. Some of those names we already like later on could fall. But it's going to go runner, like cornerback just went. Probably running back right here. This is the range.
Yeah.
You're not, and then you don't really want anybody past those names.
Well, so, I'm not totally sure about that. I think there are guys that I would be interested in, whether that's a Zamir White or a Rashad White from Arizona State. I think even Jerome Ford would be worth taking a look at. I don't think that based on what's there.
There is research that shows, second round seems to be, at least over the last few years in the more modern day NFL, where there are running backs that contribute and end up being the biggest name running backs from the draft. But I don't like the fact that there's questions around each one of those guys, right? So that's why I would tend to avoid the running back position. I think my pick here would have to be an interior offensive lineman, at least because I don't like the cornerback. And if Dave and I are on the same page, Kevin, you're on board with that. Now it's just a matter of which one.
Like we talked about earlier in the show, I'm a Dylan Parham fan. I think he brings a lot to the room. I don't think if you don't want to risk somebody, it's probably Parham here.
Let's pull the trigger. We talked about him.
Let's do it.
We talked about him. He was one guy we scouted in this episode, and I think, we have to end up with at least one of them, right? So there we go. It was the offensive line episode, and we gave some love to the offensive line. I do think some of the Spin's point here is I think the running backs go off the board before pick 50. I agree. They're going in round 2. I think definitely in round 2, you will see some of those guys gone in whatever order it may be. And if you're asking me, I hope all 3 are gone right at the top of the second round, so we get it over with and they're not even there when the Bills are picking, and we can make a decision based on best player on the board and who's falling.
Let's look at the board. Let's look at the big board. There is nobody that is necessarily standing out right now.
We have to look at corner, right? That's one that we've ignored up till this point. Cam
Taylor Britt is exactly what I was looking at.
Yeah, that's a slam dunk for me. If he's sitting and you haven't touched the position, 98th overall draft value.
Yep.
Yeah, athletic profile. We've hammered home here. It's a no-brainer. It's going to take a lot for me to kind of pivot from that
So
player.
Then
another guy who could be Cam Taylor Britt, who could be taken earlier than is on this board right now. If somebody falls in love with him, it wouldn't surprise me if he goes in the second round. And here we are at pick 89, late 3rd round, looking at him here. So I don't know if he's still there, but if he is, I would be okay with that pick. Now let's see what else is on the board.
Running back, there's nobody that I'd be willing to take in the 3rd round. Yeah. Tackle, not really anybody worthwhile at this point. Interior O-line, Alec Lindstrom, but when you've already taken one, I think you can wait a little bit longer for that. Defensive line, Fedarian Mathis.
And kind of like we talked about, probably not,
linebacker. Yeah,
I think they're all gone by our
the big
second round
names,
pick,
yeah.
let alone our third.
Yeah,
that is.
once Chad Muma comes off the board, that's pretty much
There's
the
not much.
drop off.
Can we look at? Let's just take a peek at wide receiver, for example. Even though
Sure.
we took one in the first round,
There's
just to see who's still on the
plenty of
board.
guys there.
If we haven't taken a wide receiver in one, and we did go the offensive line route,
that's my only hesitation. That's my only hesitation with wide receiver in the first round. Is like, even though we all like and acknowledge that Chris Olave is an objectively good player, this is what's available in round 3. Like there's guys. I mean, like Kyle Phillips can be a really legitimately good player in the NFL. Wan'Dale Robinson could be really good. Alec Pierce, even, who to me is
a first round pick.
I mean, to me, he could be similar, in my opinion, to like Gabe Davis in his rookie year, where you basically just sort of scheme him up and take advantage of his height, weight, and speed combination that he has there. And we know Velus Jones is somebody that a lot of teams like in this range.
Lots of wide receivers here. So even though we went wide receivers, but I still think we have to go Cam Taylor-Britt here. Yes, that's
I agree with how we've played this out. Cam Taylor-Britt's got to be.
And in a lot of these drafts, what I've done, my mock drafts, when we pick a cornerback, let's go with the pick and let it roll. We'll pick Cam Taylor-Britt here, but that does not mean we're eliminating cornerback. If anything, come up in the next round, round 4, our next pick.
Kobe Bryant.
I'm looking for another cornerback, right? So let's see who's there.
I'm totally okay with that. So let's go with Taylor-Britt.
Taylor-Britt.
Right.
But I mean, you'd probably feel pretty good with this draft knowing you've checked off, unless you're a running back person, you've checked off pretty much everything that.
If you're a running back person, you're a fan of the wrong team. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean,
you're not wrong.
Exactly. And that's my number one argument when people are like, oh, we need a running back. We could literally have no running back on the roster and we'd be fine. We have Joshua Patrick Allen. We do not need running back.
And there's Kobe Bryant still sitting there.
Yes. Oh, wow. So that's one of the names that I would love to go back-to-back on corner.
Great player.
A whole bunch of wide receivers got taken. Like bunch of wide receivers.
And there's still names here. Romeo Dubes, my guy, obviously for his name, Romeo, best name in the draft.
Justin Ross, like has had a bunch of injuries in college, but like super, super talented. Jalen Speedy Naylor from Michigan State is somebody that could be interesting. Let's look at interior line. Luke Fortner is available. Cam Jurgens is available. Lecitus Smith is available, who we know the Bills have quote unquote done their homework on.
Exactly.
Cade Mays is available.
There's that Thayer Munford K Mays argument.
Yep.
But that's you could probably wait another round even if you wanted to double dip at that position.
So we got Kobe Bryant. We got who is available at running back. We got Kyron Williams, Damian Pierce, Rashad White, Zamir White, Jerome Ford.
This is definitely the area where I'm more comfortable taking running back. Let's go to the big board again.
I saw on Haskins. Yeah, there's definitely some running backs there that they could consider for sure.
Hey,
the punt god. There we go.
Punt god, Matt Arrays. We're not taking a punter.
No, exactly. I just don't. I don't care. Probably not for me.
No.
Looking at the board here, you see a lot of linebacker, but I'm not sure those are the names.
Check tight end.
Yeah, tight end is a good one to see who's still available there. Turner, but probably still going to be there later.
Yeah. A lot of these guys.
Nothing's jumping out. Nothing's jumping out.
There's no big standout for.
I'm getting my bid in for the double dip back to back.
I think so too.
Kobe Bryant.
You want to go corner?
That is my favorite pick right here too. I think I would also go back to back corner with Kobe Bryant. I mean, there's just not another position.
I just think you're going to get a starter out of those two.
Yes, exactly. Now, this is what I said about last year's draft as well, right? The Bills pick Greg Rousseau. The Bills pick Carlos Basham. 5 years from now, if Carlos Basham is never heard from again, and Greg Rousseau is one of the biggest stars at edge in the NFL, nobody's going to look back and say, oh, what a bad draft. They're going to say that was great. And the vice versa is also true. If it was Carlos Basham who becomes the star, Greg Rousseau disappears and doesn't really become anything, nobody's going to say the Bills had a bad draft that draft. They're going to love the pick that worked. So by picking 2, you kind of protect that. And the fact of the matter is we need depth at cornerback. We don't know what's happening there. Our cornerback number 1 right now is last year's cornerback 3, so 4. So yeah, it's certainly a need. So
his comparisons are Dre Kirkpatrick 93%, which is a high indicator. So interesting pick to get him that late in the draft.
Yeah,
You have an also comp for him. He's 6'1", 198. His comp also Carlton Davis from Tampa Bay.
Ooh, I like that. All right, I'm sold now. I'm sold now.
There you go. I was going to say, do we need to get Dave on board here?
All right, we're good.
We're going.
Just a talented player.
I know he's one of Sterling's favorite players too, just so he could shout Kobe. There's my guy Romeo Dubes going to Green Bay at 140.
Look forward to Seattle. Samir White to Seattle.
Some good picks in here for the later round guys.
Good round, fourth round. Good round.
Justin Ross just went one pick ahead of the Bills in the 5th round. That's pretty good value there. But again, off the board.
So where do we want to look first? We want to look at interior line first, see what's available for the double dip there. Lessida Smith, Thayer Munford,
on the board.
Cade Mays, Chris Paul. There's guys there.
There are some names here that we've discussed. Let's look again. Let's try tight end and or running back and or one of the positions of need we haven't done yet.
I think
it's Turner. I do like that name here in the 5th round.
I think a tight end, I'm willing to wait until like 6th or 7th round, or heck, even if there's someone maybe undrafted. Yeah,
I do believe that the Bills will bring in undrafted tight ends for sure. Because that's a position where you can find a gem. They know that there's a spot available on this roster. So
all right, we are at the bottom of the barrel for running backs. We got Sincere McCormick, Zaquandre Wright, Hassan Haskins,
Tyler Strong. I mean, I guess that's the name. But again, I don't know.
Not a lot here.
I mean, even me myself, who likes running back at this point, I think in this mock or in general, we've punted on the running back room. To me, I just don't think Haskins even comes in and can even Duke Johnson, Zach Moss.
Tight end. Let's go to linebacker, maybe. I mean, again, this late, probably not something I'm looking to reach for.
Demarco Jackson is an interesting name because he tested super well, didn't he? He had like a sub 4 40 or not 40, a 3 cone, right? Am I remembering this correct? No, I'm thinking of something else. He had a sub 4. Shuttle. He had a sub 4
shuttle. Yeah, that makes more sense. I mean, do we go linebacker here? I think I like the idea of tight end. A little better. Tackle. Did we look at tackle? A swing tackle? Was there one available?
He had a 1.56 10 yard. He had a 4.55 40. Hand size 9 1/4, 125 on the broad jump, 88th percentile. 10-yard split is in the 82nd percentile. Comparisons, interesting enough, Terrell Dodson is one of his main, and Deion Jones are his 2 main comps. Interesting player for special teams. We need to replace a linebacker. It's not a crazy idea, depending on what you're thinking.
At tackle, there's really not much here. You got Luke Godeki, but he's, again, somebody we talked about as more of a guard type of guy. So
I'm in love with these late round names here, it seems, huh? Let's go back to the big board again. Is
Smith.
Overall, Arazi is still on the board. Punt God in the 5th round.
5th round is where you can take a special teamer because, like, 9 times out of 10, a 5th round pick is going to be somebody that plays primarily on special teams anyway. So if you're going to get that,
I mean, I think here's the time to take him. And you talk about what the upgrade is for this team. The potential is, hopefully we're not punting much at all. But when you have a guy who can just go out there and do his job, I look at similar to what we have at kicker, right? Yep. We don't think about extra points and long field goals now because we know we have a guy who can get it done.
I said this
same thing at punter.
I said this so many times. I said this so many times during the season on Twitter. I said it so many times in my recaps during the season. Tyler Bass is one of those guys. Yes. He's there with like Evan McPherson now, Justin Tucker, and Harrison Butker, where it's like you don't even think about it. Everyone else in the league is just hoping and praying that their kicker doesn't shank it. But those 4 guys, they're nailing it, and you don't even need to worry about it. And it would be nice to have a punter that's at least kind of like that.
And I'm not loving any of these running backs here. I think, Munford could be a guy. We've taken him before at this position, but, is this too early? We have already taken back-to-back corners. I'm thinking we got to go punter here. Any arguments?
I'm
No, I think you got a generational punter. You're not spending that much of an asset. You're talking about guys who might not make the roster at this point.
Yeah.
How can you guarantee someone makes the roster? Take a 10-year punter. I mean,
Exactly.
I don't know. I don't think it's a terrible move. Like, as a punter myself, I've been a punter. So we were joking about kickers as a former soccer player as well. Like, I do hold the specialist to a high regard. And I mean, I mean, the punting room has not been getting it done for years now here in Buffalo.
We're now back up a little earlier for our round 6 pick here. And let's see. Cade Mays still on the board, interior offensive lineman. Again, we're getting late, so it's not even a matter of, okay, what guy are you starting here? You know, we got lucky in the last round with a punter who could be a starter. But Cade Mays, a name, again, that I like, at least an interior offensive lineman. I don't know if you guys are feeling running back, tight end. We can check those out again.
Running back is pretty much bare, and I'm guessing tight end is also bare. Yep. Yeah,
nothing really
Charlie
enjoyable
Kolar just got taken. Leslie Smith just got taken. Yeah, it's going to be...
Oh, Smith would have been the pick. Yeah.
I'm good with Cade Mays. Receiver, we got Richie Robertson, Jalen Naylor, Stanley
Thornton, but maybe in the 7th round. I mean, that's still
right.
Probably... it's bare there now. It's bare there now.
Yeah. To me, the best value kind of seems like Cade Mays.
Cade Mays, again, upside. This is another love-hate guy. Some guys are like, no, I would never draft him.
Well, it's the 6th round, so you can get over the hate. Like, let's relax on hating a 6th round pick.
With this one, at least, you know, we've got Dean on the board with this one, so I think that's right. Cade Mays.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're taking a flyer.
Yeah.
Isaac Taylor Stewart, another cornerback that I really like, gone off the board at 189. He was still there, but we had already double dipped at corner. We're certainly not triple dipping at corner.
No,
that would be wild.
All right.
So now we've got
this is the second 6th round pick. What are we feeling? Maybe a safety?
Let's go to the big board and maybe get a feel for what positions on the big board. Running back, we've already agreed, kind of not the way we would go. I agree that a safety could be in play here if you're thinking about a developmental, maybe practice squad guy who, McDermott and Bean can keep there and teach and bring up, who might get swiped by another team to become a starter all of a sudden, as we've seen happen over the years with the Bills now that we are contenders and consistently good. Not a lot of names jumping out at me, not a lot of positions jumping out at me as we're scrolling through the big board. Again, we already checked tight end, running back. We're not in love with anything there. Interior defensive line, maybe filter by that and see what we have left on the board. It's up in the top corner. What do we have? Let's see.
Marquand McCall.
I don't even recognize a lot of these names, to be honest, at this point. Oh, man.
Check linebacker. That could be a last roster spot potential. I mean,
Micah McFadden.
Ross, McFadden's a guy. Joshua Ross is definitely
Michigan.
Is definitely considered a dude who can be a special teamer and make a team. So, I think that the position is probably the weakest right now. He didn't address it at all.
Okay.
I actually like the McFadden or Ross pick here. I think that those could be
special teamer ways to the roster what the Bills are looking at.
I'm good with Micah McFadden.
And another player who depth at linebacker, if you will, you know, we don't know what's happening with.
I mean, the competition's Dodson. It's not, there is room there. There's room there
to improve. If you could be the guy, you could catch on. You could be the LB3.
I got Micah McFadden as a 5th rounder jotted down here. Pro comparison, Tony Fields from the Browns. Lack of size. 2-year captain for the Hoosiers.
All right.
Good eyes. Aged blitzer. He can do some things.
Yeah. So last round pick here, round 7. We can go with our gut. What are we feeling? Pick your favorite name on the board at this point, and that's how I feel about the 7th round. Right. This isn't about drafting a player you think the next team's going to pick. This is about we want the guy who we want to tell him we like your skills enough that we made you a draft pick, even though you're at the tail end.
Smoke Monday
could make this roster. Smoke Monday. I love the name. Smoke Monday
thing
with Bubba Bolden. Those back-to-back names are just beautiful right there. That is is quite the team.
Let's see. Who else? Is there anybody else available at linebacker? I do like Malcolm Rodriguez a lot, and I would have mentioned that earlier if I had remembered that. But like he's a pretty good player. Definitely like and former wrestler, was like the Oklahoma state champion.
Oh boy, you know he's going to be on the radar.
He was the state champion of wrestling in high school. When he for wrestling. And former safety turned to linebacker, team captain. I mean, he ticks off a lot of McDermott boxes. But I'm not gonna take another linebacker. So
I don't know. I think safety is the way to go this late.
I think you need to add a DB. You need to add a safety here.
Yeah, and I think I like either Smoke or Bubba. I think Smoke would be the one for me, but
I think Smoke's a good pick here. You're looking to add that safety room.
Last pick, not too shabby, boys. We'll take a look at all of our picks in the end here. But I think this draft worked out pretty well for the Bills. Again, a couple of things we could have done differently. We maybe could have gone running back in the second. We could have gone, that first round pick was really the one that was the tone setter for us, where offensive line was on the board, but we decided to go with Olave, who was still there yet again.
And to make you feel better about the 7th, Smoke Mondays, pro comparison, Justin Simmons, all about the NFL scheme fit for him, lofty prospect comparisons, could be a deep sleeper. So
I love it. Give me that deep sleeper. I'll take it there. So Olave, we've talked about him a lot on this show, but wide receiver, excellent fit, coming in and competing for that wide receiver 2, starting every snap kind of player. Dylan Parham, glad we picked our interior offensive lineman, a guy we did some analysis on just earlier in this episode, and I think would be a good fit here at 57. Cam Taylor-Britt, we know we needed cornerback. He was still there on the board at 89. At this point, you're panicking about picking a cornerback. So we picked Cam Taylor-Britt. He's a great fit, but we do it back-to-back, coming back with another cornerback in Kobe Bryant, who, again, if you have Cam Taylor-Britt and Kobe Bryant, I like the idea that they're competing for one of those starting roles. And then you have Matt Araiza, and you're talking your punter for the next at least 5 years, maybe even more, and a guy who brings absolute consistency to that room in terms of punting. There's some questions about his holding. I know that, but who knows? Maybe somebody else can hold, or they'll teach him to hold. I don't know if it's that difficult, although some holders would say otherwise. I love the pick of Cade Mays later here in the rounds. Again, another interior offensive lineman, a position the Bills need to bring bodies in and compete. Micah McFadden, the linebacker, a late round pick, special teams guy, but can compete again. If something happens there, he could end up as high as linebacker 3. And we just heard Kevin mention that Smoke Monday. Great comparisons, great comps. I love that. More developmental, maybe, but he could catch on and, sit on the roster, sit on the practice squad, be one of those guys to turn into a star. So not an overall bad 7-round mock draft. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I like doubling down on corner with those 2 corners in particular, because like they're really, Cam Taylor-Britt was kind of the only guy worth that selection in the 3rd round for that position, and it was like, do you really want to pin all of your rookie cornerback hopes on Kobe Bryant? Not really, but if you have him as your 2nd cornerback taken, I'm more okay with that. Dylan Parham at 2nd, Chris Olave at 1st. I like Chris Olave a lot. I am not going to be upset with Chris Olave. I am excited if he gets to this team. I think that there's just so much depth at receiver where it's like, if the board had fallen differently, and I was okay with taking Chris Olave at that spot just because of the way the board fell, but if it falls a little bit differently, I think you can wait until the 3rd round to get a receiver.
Certainly.
But that really just sort of depends on what kind of corner is available at 25. So,
and especially again, the way this really could have changed is if the Bills go with Green in that 1st round, then which way does it go from there? You take the interior offensive lineman in round 2. What are you looking at? You have more on the board there. Yeah. You could look corner, you could look other positions, and then wide receiver. As we looked through the draft, there were some guys in that 3rd, 4th round that we really liked that were very pickable there. And again, I think that could be the case as well going into the actual draft. So with that, I mean, I want to thank you both for joining me again. I know this is much longer than we expected to go, but this was absolutely amazing. Loved it. Thank you for being on again. And let's do it one more time. Tell them who you are, where you're at, how to find you. Dave, go ahead.
You can find me right there at DFAUXY at DFoxy on Twitter. You can follow me for some very lukewarm takes and some very inconsistent ones. And you can also find me every Monday night with good friend Kyle Salagi, fellow Cover One contributor. We do the Cover One roundup there at starting at 7 p.m. and we usually push it right up against the air raid hour at 9 p.m. So it's always a good time there. So
yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
You can find me on the Going Deep podcast, the Friday show. You can find us always with Mike Bunt, 8 o'clock. We have some cool guests coming on. We're actually going to bring on Kent Front, the creator of Raz. So that should be a really great show to kind of talk about like, hey, why do you have some of these scores? What happens when you don't, when they don't score out? Like Utah, we got a lot of questions coming.
Yes, definitely. So. Oh, that's gonna be a good
it's gonna be a fun one.
Fun, sure. Like that angle for sure, especially in this draft prep time, right? This is ideal for him to have him then. Yeah. I want to thank you both again for joining me. Two guys who have come on to join the Cover One Network and have done a great job on their respective shows. So make sure you're tuning in for them. And remember, this is the Hoof Podcast. My partner Sterling will be back. Eric will be back next week. Thank you guys for filling in. This has been great again. We are the Cover One Network. This is what you get on Cover One. You got a great flavor of it right now tonight with the different shows. And of course, we've got shows every night of the week, mostly, even 2 some nights of the week. We've got all the best action for you. The best draft prep. We're going to be doing draft coverage live on draft night, day 1 and day 2 and day 3. I'm definitely going to be there for the first 2 days, maybe even day 3. We'll see how it all works out, but excited to do that with you all. And we're just leading it up little by little. Smash that like. Don't forget, before you leave here, hit that like. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Hoof Podcast. Go Bills.